I never came out to my mom and dad. I never had to, actually, because conveniently, minutes before my parents left to go get their picture taken for our lovely church directory, my mom confronted me about how my best friend was obviously more than a friend. She wasn't wrong, although I was a little surprised that it took like 2 years to figure that out. Yeah. I was raised in a conservative Catholic family, the kind that like doesn't turn people away for Christmas if they don't have somewhere to go. Mom was always cooking extra food in the event that my brother or I would bring over a friend for dinner. In our family, we were taught to lead with love, and that in order to heal, we had to make space in our hearts for forgiveness. We hosted Bible study every week, and each of us played an active role in Sunday's Mass, or Wednesdays, or Saturdays, or pick a fucking day of the week. You get the point. And these were all things that my father reminded me of as he took me for a drive shortly after my mom outed me for being gay. And, it's typical like rainy Portland afternoon. And I vividly remember like how hard he pounded that steering wheel, while he screamed at me about how gays go to hell, and I will too, because the Bible tells you so. So here's my first takeaway. There are way more Bible references of why you shouldn't be an asshole. Now, if you ask my dad about this incident, he'd tell you that he doesn't remember, which is cute and convenient. And if you Googled that phenomena, you would see that trauma has that effect on people. A handful of weeks from my first deployment, I was alone. I was standing in the corner of this dingy bar in Tacoma, Washington. Floors were sticky, drinks were stiff, kind of typical gay bar. It had been, I'd been to this bar like a million times before, always came alone. And I would see other soldiers like lurking in the shadows, hanging out with friends. Their eyes would be like scanning the room. And whenever we would lock gaze, there was always this silent acknowledgement that we were there for the same reason, some like sort of like strange unspoken solidarity. And that's because this was before the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was a policy enacted during the Clinton administration, lauded as progress because it meant that we couldn't be asked if we were gay. For decades prior, the Army conducted sting operations, sending plainclothed MPs, that's military police, into gay bars, who would then sniff out military patrons, lure them into flirtatious sort of exchanges, and then arrest them. So as you can imagine, this made folks like me rather paranoid and often lonely. We never knew who we could trust, and romantic relationships, in that kind of environment are hard to come by and even harder to maintain because of the stressors of living in secrecy. I myself came under investigation for homosexual conduct when I was a young soldier. I was in training, and a fellow teammate whom I trusted and had confided in ratted me out to our leadership. I stood there before my commander as he read me my rights under Article 31 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I remember my knees were shaking so uncontrollably, I thought that they would buckle and I would collapse. I had this like sick feeling in the pit of my stomach that you get when you know that you've like really fucked up, And I remember when he finished reading this to me, he looked at me and he said, "Soldier, this sort of behavior brings shame on our unit." By the way, up to this point, my performance had been exemplary, no big deal. And in fact, I was ranked like 1 out of 130 or so trainees. And yet, blink of an eye, all of that was forgotten. My investigation, it turned out okay, thanks to a lack of evidence, but that wasn't the case for a lot of folks. I watched LGBTQ folks or soldiers get discharged after being found out, like left and right. And I myself even helped with some of that paperwork. I even removed a soldier from my team in Iraq. Now, the Army, the Army operates on 7 core values. One of them is integrity. For years, I lied to my closest friends, friends who were giving me, who were willing to lay down their lives for me, who went to war with me. And here I was fabricating stories of fucking boyfriends and coming up with masculine pseudonyms for girlfriends, just so I could share like little bits of my personal life. I was like a survival mechanism, you pick those up. I picked that up from my parents. And on September 20th, 2011, President Obama officially repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And overnight, my life changed. I could now live openly. My relationships finally had the oxygen that they needed to breathe. And most importantly, I could live with integrity. I eventually fell crazy in love with an awesome girl that I met at jump school. It's where you learn how to jump out of airplanes. Sounds a lot cooler than it is. And a little after that, we got engaged, and wouldn't you know, my once disapproving father bought himself a fancy suit and a new pair of shoes in preparation for walking me down the aisle. We got married in North Carolina in the spring of 2016, and I danced with both of my parents at the reception. It's kind of one of the great things about having a non-traditional wedding is you can kind of make it as you can make it your own. Coworkers from past and current units came, and let me tell you, that was a good fucking time. That reception was lit. Life was awesome. I had it all. And it was like I'd been wanting to live this open, normal life for so long, and all of a sudden I was like, I just like had it. It's like hard. I can't really accurately articulate like how good that felt. But as you all know, just because you can live a normal life doesn't mean that shit doesn't get hard. I was coming home from my last deployment, and I was pretty nervous to see my wife. My trip abroad had been challenging in a lot of ways I'm not going to get into. But one of those reasons was that I could tell something was going on at home in my marriage. And when I finally got back to the States, I finally saw my wife. She was distant. She's cold. Just like unavailable. And as it turns out, she'd been having an affair for almost the entire time I was deployed. she wanted a divorce. So takeaway number 2, sometimes things don't work out, and that's okay. Now, at this point, I wasn't sure what I was doing with my life. A lot of stuff seemed like it was not going according to plan. So I did what any other rational / emotional person would do, and I decided to leave the Army, and I applied to Wharton. And it was at Wharton that I found a kind of acceptance and a community I'd never experienced before. It was a place I felt safe to actively invest in this part of my identity. Out for Business, a dedicated family of folks like me and allies who put rainbow stickers on name placards to showcase their support. I mean, even though Don't Ask, Don't Tell had been repealed, stigmas and homophobic comments, that shit still existed. So for me, seeing that rainbow sticker on a classmate's placard, that made a huge impact in the days of in-person classes, of course. And despite everything that happened, I found support in our community. But as many of you know and have experienced, Wharton life has its own complexities, right? For me, it wasn't that I was afraid of running into a classmate that I hooked up with after Bonners. It was that I was afraid of running into my practice wife, who was a second year at Wharton and an active member of O4B and a Vets Club. P.S. I call her my practice wife and say practice marriage because, sometimes you need more than one attempt at something before you get it right. Also feels less like a failure. And so anyways, back to Wharton. Yeah, I remember walking down the hallway after totally bombing my magic midterm and just sweating, anxious because I was worried about running into her. I knew that this would be my reality before I moved to Philly, and I was worried, to be honest, I was worried that people would think I was desperately hoping to rekindle that relationship or whatever and following her to Wharton. And at times I thought, maybe I shouldn't move to Philly and actually, commit. But then I was like, fuck that. I'm not gonna let someone else keep me from doing what I know I need to do. And frankly, it's just an incredible opportunity. So I'm here. And while my parents once used their religion to lash out at me, and make me feel less than, I've always stayed true to my faith. I don't usually talk about this part of myself because I feel like people get weird, weird and squirmy or whatever whenever people talk about faith or churchy things. But my faith is honestly what carried me through. It's what's carried me through my darkest moments. Plenty of folks, to include some of our classmates, use their religion as grounds to put people down. And having been on the receiving end of that kind of bullshit, I do my best to use my faith to lift others up, including myself. I've leaned heavily on it to push through and at times, frankly, felt like I was crawling over glass. So to my Wharton family, here is my third and final takeaway. Lead with love and don't be an asshole. People are fighting their own battles, Let's do our best to support each other. And when you find yourself in the trenches, remember that you've done hard things. Lean into it, push through, because you're worth it. Thank you for listening.